Yes, good after. Welcome to this first roundtable in this great dialogue, this discussion from after, and the one of tomorrow is the heart of the event that we have this weekend.
What we have proposed as a theme for the roundtable discussion is the issue of what makes us proud to be Métis and Francophone. We chose that theme because the organizing committee, in discussing perhaps what we could suggest as an orientation for our conversation this afternoon, is despite our very different situations, I think that in many cases our aspirations and our goals are the same. We strive to remain distinct peoples with a distinct culture, distinct language or languages. I think we both seek to transmit that onto our children. So in many ways, pride, we think, is an issue that is perhaps a unifying kind of a theme.
We can create a theme, but Roundtable belongs to both communities, and it is up to us together to decide what we're going to discuss this afternoon. And up to now, and I hope it'll be the case again today, we are looking for a first dialogue between the two communities, but a dialogue that's authentic, that's honest. We can't be afraid of things that are a little difficult sometimes. We mustn't be afraid to ask questions that maybe would be tricky questions or touchy questions.
However, I'm confident that even if we are talking sometimes about hard things, that we can reflect together about how can we in the future make sure that those unfortunate situations that may have occurred in the past don't happen again. And what can we do? What kind of values do we need to establish? What kind of criteria and conditions and approaches do we need to talk about perhaps to make sure that that doesn't happen again? But I think we're going to have a wonderful discussion. We have 12 people, 6 people from the Francophone community from across the South and 6 people from the Métis community from across the South who are all involved in their communities, well regarded in their communities, and who have honored us today with their presence. They'll be leading the discussion. We have 2 co-facilitators that Frederic will be introducing in a moment who will be moderating the discussion. And they will be stimulating it, putting questions to the guests around the round table, but then going out to the audience and asking people in the audience if there's anything people like to say, observations or experiences, stories they'd like to share, and going back and forth. So it'll be a sort of a fluid kind of conversation going back and forth between the facilitators and the 12 guests around the round table, and then with lots of opportunity for the people who are in the audience to participate. So I think without any further ado, I'll hand the mic back to Frédéric.
Who's going to present the 2 facilitator will be Calvin Racette, that I presented him earlier, and just
just be short, because Calvin is on the school board of Regina, has specialized in Indigenous and First Nation and Métis curriculum, and he has served about 25 years in that in education in that area. Thank you, Calvin. And Barbara Riley, she's a native from Montreal, but she lives in Prince Albert.
She lives in Prince Albert for many years. She's president of the français School Board and very implicated in that community. So I give them, they can take over and present us the people around the table.
Calvin?
Thank you, Barbara. Thank you. It's wonderful to be here. A wonderful afternoon, and I'm glad to see so many people take an active interest in this. Barbara and I are going to introduce to you our panel, and then we're going to start working them hard. Anyway, at that point, my First individual I'd like to introduce is Senator Gilbert Pelchet. Gilbert was born and raised in Crescent Lake, Saskatchewan, which is just south of Yorkton. Crescent Lake, of course, is an original Métis community. He's a Michif speaker. He's a storyteller. We've had the pleasure of a little of that in the last couple of days. He is the Senate Chair of the Métis Nation of Saskatchewan. He is the husband to Mary, a father of 3 children, and a grandpa. And according to his grandchildren, he's a great grandpa. Ladies and gentlemen, Gilbert Pelchet.
I would like to present Janine, named French parents in Gravelbourg, went to a small campaign rural school and went on the public system in Gravelbourg until grade 12. She was at the normal school. She's not sure if it made her normal in Beauceville, Quebec, to come back to Gravelbourg to teach the first designated school in Toronto. She married somebody in Lisieux. She came back to teach French immersion, Willow Bunch, for 28 years to up to its closure. Now teaching Saskatchewan. She's still living on a ranch. They welcome their children and the 4 grandchildren. Janine Bouvier.
My next individual I'd like to introduce is Betty McKenna. Betty was born in the Pas, Manitoba. Her father was Ojibwe. Her mother was Michif. Betty is a practicing elder in both First Nations and Métis ceremonial traditions. She currently resides in Moose Jaw. I'm very proud to say Betty works with me at the Regina Public School Board. She makes my job very easy. I'm truly honored to have her there. She's married to Ken, has 3 children and 3 wonderful grandchildren. Betty McKenna.
I would like to, Louis Schmidt, parents born of French parents in the States. She's fransaskoise, full blood. She works in the French sector for 16 years, for a few years. President in exchange programs between Quebec and Saskatchewan. She's a new teacher in Bellegarde. Between that, she created the immersion program in Belleville and have a camp in the north.
I'd like to introduce to you Joanna Padiandi, nee Blondo, born and raised in Estevan, Saskatchewan. She says she has some of her family are still there, working in the oil patch. She currently lives on a farm near Melville. She has an upholstery shop in Fenwood. Joanna raises and trains horses, and she's actively involved in the Métis community there as well. She's the local president. She serves as a Métis elder for the Provincial Métis Justice and the Batoche Museum. She has 3 children, 8 grandchildren, and focuses her energy on making things better for the Métis community. She has a special interest in Métis history and genealogy. Joanna Padiandi.
I'd like to present Henri Bouvier from Lisieux, Saskatchewan. She worked in education and taught 1 year in Gravelbourg and 2 other places in Manitoba. From 1966 to 2003, he lives in Willow Bunch since 2003, implicated in community, and he is the one of the councillors on AFCF.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to introduce you to Drew Lamontagne. Drew was born in Lloydminster. He says he was raised in Les Eaux. He currently lives in Assiniboia. Drew was very talented and made it a hockey player in the Western Canadian Hockey League. He currently is an active part of the Métis community. He's married and has 1 child. Ladies and gentlemen, Drew Lamontagne.
At the other end, Robert Carignan from Pontex, live since then, since 70, is a businessman and a farmer. His implication in the French francophonie started about there. He was president of the Francophone of Pontiac, original and vice president of CA of SAFC. He was also a member of the board for the Collège Mathieu for 18 years, member of the Cultural Commission of Fransaskoise, and also worked on many projects led and for Pontex. He is working as a counselor for economic development of communities in the Southwest, and he's also represented a rural community for Saskatchewan for RDEE Canada. Robert Carignan.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to introduce you to Randy Gaudry. One of my favorite things in the world is teasing Randy, and one of his favorite things is picking on me. But I'm going to be very dignified this afternoon and introduce Randy. He was born in Willow Bunch. He left here at age 10, and he is very actively involved in the rodeo circuit as an announcer and in documenting the rodeo circuit and everything about it. He came back 13 years ago, and he currently resides in Willow Bunch. He was instrumental in reviving the local in Willow Bunch, the Métis Local, and was very actively involved in that. He was instrumental in getting the history book, The Métis of Willow Bunch, written and published. He currently lives here. He's married, has 2 children, and 1 grandchild. Ladies and gentlemen, Randy Gaudry.
Français Sono at my left, in Congo, married and father of 4 beautiful girls. He lives in Canada since for the last 15 years, in Saskatchewan for 5 years. He's a member of many associations and provincial organizations, national, international, and he studied first and second up to he did all his studies in Quebec and works in Gravelbourg. He looks after coordination of projects.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to introduce you to Dorothy Fayant, née Desjardins, born in Indian Head, currently, raised on the road allowance in the Katepo Valley, married in 1961 to a Métis man, raised 10 children. Around 1970, she realized that the Métis Nation cause needed to be recognized and began working for the Métis Local in LeBret. Her first office was the local secretary, and she's worked tirelessly for the Métis ever since and is currently the president of the LeBret Métis Local. Ladies and gentlemen, Dorothy Fayant.
Lastly, José Estranger from Gravelbourg and graduated from Collège Mathieu, comes from a big family, so it's really a big success. And she's passionate about travel to find out different cultures around the world. She traveled in South America, Central America, and Europe. She helped to develop the regional travel, and she does a lot of volunteer work. She coordinator of artistic festival in the summer, sat on the committee for the museum in here in Gravelbourg, and also was on the committee for the Historical Society of Saskatchewan. She works in the Francophone community services for the last 7 years. She has lots of experience.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is our panel, and our general theme is what makes you proud to be Francophone or Métis? And I think we'd like to throw it back to our panel and saying, I will ask members of the panel from the Métis community, is there any one of you that would like to give me an initial reaction? I'd like all of you to give an initial comment on that very statement. What is that one thing? Is there one thing, or what is one thing that makes you proud of your community? It makes you proud of being Métis. Betty.
Are young people's accomplishments for me as an older person. The accomplishments of our young are what make me proud to be Métis. When I see, and I do have Métis heritage, although my father was from the Ojibwe Nation, to see our young and to see them succeed in this day and age, and to see how hard they work, and to watch them pick up the things of their culture and run with it, and watch them take it from where they may have learnt it at the laps of their grandfathers and grandmothers, and take it up onto the world stage where we have singers and artists and people doing phenomenal things now as young people. And I think that's what makes me proud to say, yeah, that's Métis stuff.
Thank you.
On the Francophone, Francis said, okay, I will say, but maybe I'll do an alphabetical order. So, seniority order, whatever you want. So, Henri, what could you share with us? Why are you proud to be French? To be Francophone, for us to be proud of is to possibility the advantage that I can talk in my own language, to be able to appreciate the music, the Francophone culture, and I can pray in my language. What I feel really on the bottom of my heart is that what I can express really that's what makes me proud. Thank you.
I'll stick right here and I'll put this on Drew right now to give us an answer. What makes you proud, Drew?
The history and culture, and how they settled actually most of the West, and our local for doing so much and being involved and having so much to do for youth and putting on events such as our gun shoot and everything else, I guess.
That's it?
Yeah.
All right, thank you, Drew.
If we continue on the theme, and the alphabetical order will go to from Bouvier to Bouvet, what makes you proud to be a Francophone? For me to be proud of to be Francophone, it's not just my own pride. It's for my whole family. We were able to keep our French language and to use it the possible way. I'm a second of a family of 12 children. Each of my brother and sister was able to continue to work and use French in their work and to make a difference in the life of people around them. So that makes me very proud.
We'll stick right close and we'll go to Gilbert. Tell me, Gilbert, what are those things that make you proud?
Well, when you start hearing stories about the Métis years ago, way before my time, they've had a rough time. They, as a grown-up kid myself, when I was growing up, we were still having very rough. We faced a lot of hardships, and but we always came up again. And now that my kids were able to go to school, which I wasn't able to finish, couldn't go to university, but now that my kids went and my grandchildren are going to university and they're getting jobs now, and and they're Métis, and they're always, for them they say, well, I'm a Métis. My dad was a Métis. My dad was a liar because he's a storyteller, and but they're still proud of their dad, but they all say, well, we are a Métis. We were born Métis. We're gonna die Métis. Regardless where my kids go, they're always proud to say we're a Métis, and that's what makes me one proud Métis.
Ah, excellent.
here we have, I'm losing the alphabetical order here. So would it be Robert, I think, is the next one. Robert, go ahead. What makes you proud? I thought you were going to come and attack me. No, it's because you're hiding or you lost a little weight. I like to be here, this position here. But for me, my pride really is I'm proud of my parents, my grandparents, and I'm proud to see that they transmitted this culture, this pride in my heritage. I was able to pass it on to my children. My children are passing it on to my grandchildren. This possibility, this chance that they have to be able to work together to really live our culture. We can watch TV in French. We can read newspapers in French. We listen to the French radio. We go to cultural event, and we develop as a whole. We can do it together in French and with the majority. Because everybody understands French at home, to be able to pass it on as far as my grandchildren, I'm ensured that they will pass it on to their own children. So this becomes really emotional for me. Thank you, Robert.
Well, I'm just going to stay real close and go to Dorothy. Dorothy, could you give us your initial thoughts?
As far as being proud of being a Métis, I've always known Métis people to be proud people. I was raised to be a proud Métis person, and it just stems from the family, I guess. And although we had to oppress our pride outside, we still had it inside. And our just being our own people makes me proud to know that we are of one Métis nation as a people, and as equal as everyone else. If we keep our culture and our tradition and our language, I am in the process of recording and saving our language right now for our children and our ancestors who has passed. And before they passed, my late brothers said that they thought for sure that they would lose our language, and our children would never learn our language. But I'm in the process now of recording and saving our language for our ancestors and our children. And I'm just proud to be Métis.
Thank you, Dorothy.
What makes you proud of being a Francophone? I think it's because the heritage, my parents, and as I said a little while ago, I come from the Congo, and it's a country which has perhaps 250 dialects, but my parents had chose to educate us in French, and I think that the first word I heard it was a French word as soon as I arrived from my mother, and since that time, it's this language which has allowed me to express who I am, what I am. Basically, I don't speak any language better than French, and that's my culture. So I'm really deeply proud to do that. I live that culture, and I carry it, and I express myself better in French than anything else, and that was make me really proud, and I'm responsible for passing that on to my children and my grandchildren one day.
Okay, I'll stay real close here. Mr. Randy, Could you tell us what your initial thoughts, Randy? What makes you proud of being Métis?
Well, that's quite a complex question, what makes me proud to be a Métis. I was always proud to be a Métis. We were taught by my dad and that side of the family that we were Métis and to be proud of it. And I left this town, as you heard before, when I was 10. Heard a lot of stories about it, and we'd come back and visit every once in a while. But every time I came back down into this valley, I always felt a sense of belonging, that it was home. And I lived in various places, Banff and Cody, Wyoming, different places for a while, beautiful places, but none as beautiful as Willow Bunch. So I guess being proud to be from Willow Bunch was one thing, but when I moved back here, started to look into our Métis heritage and our past, I became very proud to be a Métis. And we'll get into it a little later on some reasons I became proud to be a Métis, but in this area, but I felt it was time to really explore what our ancestors did do here. And the things we learned through the years writing this book has made me very proud to be a Métis of Canada and very, very proud to be a Métis of Willow Bunch.
Thank you, Randy.
Louise Schmidt. I could say that I'm proud of being Francophone because proud of the fact that we're 11 generations in Canada and there's still French spoken in my family, and I'm proud of the fact that to be a member of the family, we continue to contribute to the Francophone world, and it's very important. It's close to our heart, and the culture is very important for us too.
Okay, that brings me to Joanna. Could you please give us your initial thoughts on what makes you proud to be Métis?
Like I was saying that when I was in school and a teacher sent me home with our citizenship papers, and I took it home with me, and my grandfather helped me fill it out, and he put down origin and he put down Métis. And the next day I went back to school, and the teacher said there's no such thing as a Métis, and she crossed it out and put French down. She said, you're French, your name is Blondo, and that's what you are. I was so upset. I went home, I was just angry. And because whatever my grandfather said, that was the law in our home. And my grandparents raised me. I was born a couple of days after the Second World War, and Dad went to war, and Mom went to work in a dairy in Estevan. So, and I lived with my grandparents most of my life till they passed on. So, she was born here, my grandmother. She was a Gardepee, Agnes Gardepee from Charlie Gardepee family. But I've always been told we are Métis, and never was ashamed of it, and put it in everybody's face I can. And also, I'm on quite a bit of boards for the province, and very proud that my name's been good enough to be put there. So I guess, and my children all know they're Métis, and my daughter works for the was the Victim Services. Now she works for Yorkton Tribal Council as a court worker. And there's always things that I have to go and speak about and things. So I'm very proud to be Métis. Thank you.
Thank you, Joanne.
We have Joselle Stanger, who will give us a different point of view. She can't talk about her grandchildren. I don't think so, or the children. You're sure of that? Could you share with us the youth, the voice of youth here? What makes you proud to be Francophone? I'm not as young as that now. I am proud of the fransaskoise because of the fact that I live in the Canadian West and I speak French. I was able to learn French coming from an exogame family. My mother has Austrian roots. My father was Belge, pure Belgian, and with all the challenges that the Francophones have gone through and the rate of assimilation, we have still a lot of opportunity. I went to college Mathieu. I can work in my language. I can communicate with my parents in French and have a social life in French and English. So it's like a good balance in my life. With the knowing the French language, I've been able to learn Spanish because it's so much so close, and the fact that gives me so many opportunities to know and to understand the other cultures, other languages, and to have a spirit, open mind. And I think that with my generation, it's the racism, prejudice, it's no longer accepted. So I'm very proud to be unique and to be a fransaskoise.
Thank you. We've had our first initial little touch and saying everybody brought something to the table, something unique, something respectful. I just sort of would like to throw it back to anybody and just sort of saying, okay, whenever you become proud of something, usually there's somebody or something that is responsible for making you show that pride. Usually it's someone. I think of my own life, it was my mother and my grandmother who really set my identity for me and made me proud of my brown face and my brown hands and who I was. And I just like to throw that back to any member of the panel, that who is it that affected you, or what was it that affected you that encouraged you to support that pride and develop that pride in your culture? Volunteers? Ah.
I'm going to go back into history a little bit. I watched television this summer, and I followed the celebrations in Quebec. They're celebrating their 400th anniversary, and at that point, it really struck me because we have some certain history in our family, and my ancestors were already in Canada at that time. And that really struck me, and I said to myself, we're 400 years old. There are people who are my ancestors who managed to keep this language in spite of all the difficulties they faced through all the things that happened, through their travels, because I'm in the West. They did not stay in Quebec, obviously. They went through the United States, and the families were separated, and my grandfather never saw his brother again because in the States, my grandfather came into the West, and his brother went into the Boston area in the United States. They never saw each other again. But in spite of all that, from my father's side, my mother's side too, they kept the French language. That's quite a heritage, an inheritance for me. I see myself as another link in the chain. Because of that inheritance, I have the responsibility to continue and to pass on this strength and this pride to my children who are all speak French, and to my grandchildren who speak it. I have my son who calls me from Saskatoon and who says, "Mother, speak to me in French." I'm losing my words. Say anything, but speak to me in French, so that I won't lose my language. That's worth something. Are there others who would like to share a key moment or a key person who really influenced you in this pride in your life, which had this impact on you? I like to add what Carolyn said. I too, what Janine said. I personally, my pride comes from my mother. I think that all mothers in families have this role to pass on the culture to the other generation. It's really something, it's a role which is very important for children, so that children learn from their mother. In my case, that was no different, but my mother was, she was historian, and she was very strong in that area. One remark she made when I was a teenager, I didn't really care about my culture, my language. She said, I didn't think it was important in the rebellious years. Anyway, I remember she said to me always, don't forget your name and who you are. That rings my ears still when I often think of that again.
One of the things that sort of really strikes me hard when I listen to just those first two initial comments is people say that their language, they're very proud of their language. Their language is very important to them. I unfortunately don't speak my own language. My language is not taught in school. My language is not supported anywhere. I'm pleased that we have a couple of people here who do speak our language. And Gilbert or Dorothy, would one of you like to sort of give a comment on how you feel about language and what the importance of it is to our culture and our history?
Well, Michif, I consider it my first language, because that's the first language I learned was Michif. I couldn't speak English. I didn't know English, but when my parents, my grandparents, my great-grandparents, they all spoke Michif, and that was the only language I've ever heard. And when I was 6, 7 years old, my mother started to try to teach us, how to write our name, because we're going to have to go to school someday. But they wouldn't allow us to go to school where we lived. There was room in that school, but they just said, no, you can't come to school here. So we couldn't go to school there. We had to move back to Crescent Lake, where they built a school for the Métis and the Treaty. We all went to school in the same place. But my language was Michif. That's why I'm able to speak Michif. I never forgot it. But my siblings who are younger than I am, they can't even speak their language anymore. There's only 2 or 3 in our family now that's able to speak it, like myself. And the younger ones, they can't. And I come from a family of 15. So we were a pretty large family too. But my dad spoke several different languages, but never did I hear him speak any other language but Michif when we were growing up, except when he met some French people, he spoke French fluently. And if reserve people come and visit him, he spoke their language as well. Regardless who came to visit him, he spoke that language. But I could never learn to speak. I wanted to learn how to speak French. And I got a couple of teachers here beside me that are willing to teach me how to speak French.
It's very interesting, we talking about the question of language, and among my travels as a school counselor, I run into a lot of people who have good French names, and you see, Normas Barbaroli, no, Jolie. I met. People said to me often, my wife was a Francophone. She was Francophone and doesn't speak it anymore. When I go to school, I only spoke French, but now I'm incapable of speaking it. And I understand your challenge. You talking to me about wanting to pass that on. And we also, in the Francophone community, we had, we talk about assimilation, the loss of the language. Are there any here among the Francophones who are the only in their family, ones of the family who managed to keep their French? Oui, and you, coming from an Exocam family, how does your mother ensure that it was a value that you would carry on? My mother, Gloria, and her parents were Austrian, who spoke German among themselves, and I found that sad that they weren't able to share their language, the German language, with her, because I wanted to learn German eventually, so I could return into my Austrian roots. But my mother learned French for my father. My father taught, and we, as the children, we didn't have any choice. We had to speak French everywhere. Even at the age of 31 years, speak French with your father. My mother was a very good person who always encouraged us to speak French, and who my brothers and my sister spoke French also too. And it's definite, our children are going to speak French, I can promise you that.
I'm going to focus in on Drew. As being a young man and the youngest on our panel, and I'd like to sort of go back to that question we had a couple of minutes ago, and the forces that make you proud of your Métis heritage, and who are those forces? Who are those people, and what are those things that make you proud of who you are, Drew? I'm assuming it's certainly your parents, but could you just...
Especially my dad. He's been president of the local here for, I don't know how long, 10 years or something, and before he was that, I didn't really acknowledge or anything that I was a Métis person until he was president, so he really got me going on it. And not much else, I guess.
Short and sweet. Thank you, Drew.
That's me.
That's you. I'll believe that when I see it.
Could I continue with another question? Robert mentioned the question of the rebellious youth. When you're youth, not now. And the question is, have you always been proud of your identity and of your culture? That's a question for the Francophones and the Métis too. Were there moments where you were less proud? What changes in society or in yourselves allowed you to feel pride again? Would somebody like to speak about that? You're talking about your rebellion. Somebody else? Francis? The feeling of pride, it's really developed when I found myself in a minority situation. I must say that the country where I come from has 4 official languages, 4 national languages. My parents chose to educate us in French. And the Swahili in the Congo, for those who know African languages, Swahili, Lingala, and Chiloba in Congo. And my parents came from a village where we spoke Chiloba. It was one of the national languages of the Congo. But at home, it was French, always French. And when we were outside, some of our uncles, some members of the extended family did not speak French. So when they came to the house, they were free to speak in the language which they were best at ease to communicate with us. But at home, with our parents, it was always French, and everything was spoken in French. We have to say the context in which we evolved did not allow us to develop French as it could be, but the parents insisted that we develop. The education was done in French. and later on we could evolve in our studies until, well, the children grew up and we began university, and I came to Canada for my education. So I've always in a majority situation, and I've found that it was the automatic. And when I decided to move into the West, Canadian West, that's where I must say that caught up with me, and I realized that I had to be proud of being a Francophone, and I began to teach adults, teach French to adults, Anglophone adults, and the exchanges and the work and the homework and I saw how much people were concerned about learning French or not doing French that I could use. And I said to myself, it's a whole inheritance that I've got to keep. I've got to work hard for that cause. I've got to pass it on, this language and this culture, to my children. Thank you.
I'm going to pick on Randy for a moment here. And Randy, have you always been proud of your identity and your culture? And I'm sure there are times when you felt less proud. And perhaps you could share some of those experiences. Perhaps what made you feel proud, what made you feel less proud, things like that.
Well, being proud, we were always taught to be proud of our Métis heritage. You know, Gilbert, you were talking about how you came from a larger family and you learned Michip. I heard Michip quite a bit at mainly French at my grandparents, just over here in the coulee, and we never learnt it, but like you too, I have an older brother. He learned French and he still can speak French quite fluently. We never did learn it in that way. So, you know, we lost that part of it. But, you know, I find it quite interesting to hear a lot of people talking about their language and how proud they are of it. And really the Métis language, official language, is Michip. But in communities such as this, they were encouraged in no uncertain ways or terms to speak French instead of Michip, especially in school or whatever. So they kind of lost a lot of our official language as Métis people. But also the French community, they certainly thrived and kept the language going in this community. But you know, a lot of times when you hear, I'm proud of being part French, and when you hear, I've heard slanderous terms against Métis people, but I've also heard slanderous terms against French people. You know, you frog or whatever, and you know, all this kinds of things, and that's part of me too. My brother was talking about that today, where he heard that one. He was in Calgary working, and he spoke French with a few on our crew. Well, you're French then, you know. And he said he's seen both sides of this then, you know, and it got me thinking, you know, about a lot of this stuff. Where I guess being proud of Métis, one of my proudest times, learning about my ancestors, my great-grandfather, the things that he did in this area in particular. He built the stable for the Northwest Mounted Police. He contracted to do that in Wood Mountain. He was one of the interpreters and scouts that accompanied Sitting Bull back to Fort Beaufort, North Dakota. Contracted to build the telegraph line from here to Wood Mountain, and also hauled the mail from Moose Jaw, Willow Bunch, and Wood Mountain, and different things he did as an entrepreneur. But also what the Métis really did contribute in this part of the world. They really helped develop this part of the world for settlers to come in. They embraced them, and you know, it kind of come back to bite them after, but they still kept going, and they were resilient people. I guess one of the lower points of being a Métis would be when I when you're a kid and you're taught that they're they're a second-class person, or you're taught that you're inferior or whatever. And Dorothy Fayant said, it's nice to know that a Métis person is equal as any other person, and we are. But when you learn both sides of it, you're taught one way and then you're trying to do the other. It's and some of our own Métis people can be very hard on us ourselves, and that can be a low point in a person to be proud that they're Métis. Some of our own people, the way they've treated us or the things they have done on behalf of the Métis, you wonder about that kind of stuff too. But when it comes to language, I would say Michif is our official language of Métis, but French also is a great part of it. And I heard it lots from a lot of my ancestors. Learned it a little bit in school, but we left early and I lost it all. But it's nice to see like an older brother who can keep it going, and other people. I can still understand some things. There was one fellow from town here. He was quite the fellow, and he said, "You don't speak French?" And I said, "No." And he kind of grinned. He said, "You just know enough so they know if you're talking about you, eh?" And that was kind of funny in a way, but it's we got a long way to go with the languages and with the distrust and the racism. Like it was said here a little while ago about how racism can't be tolerated anymore, and it shouldn't be. But there's a lot of that. You hear a lot of that, and from people you shouldn't hear it from. So to go forward, you got to know where you come from to know where you're going. So we have to learn about that. We have to instill that in our younger people and instill pride in them, but also to instill in them that they're no better than anybody else, but they're as good as everybody else. And that's going to take some time, but I think it can happen.
Wonderful.
Thank you, Randy. It's well said. So, on the Francophone group, are there some that would like to talk about rebellious years? Louise, did you have one at the time where you kind of hid that it wasn't cool to be a Francophone? I wasn't a never rebel, but I can share. I heard today in a conversation that in the years when I moved to Saskatoon, it was 1966, and we could have gotten lost amongst the Anglophone. There were no immersion school, no French school. There was a school, French school, so we were learning French after school. And maybe we could say that maybe our parents were rebels. They didn't want to lose French, so they fought. They created a small Francophone school in somebody's basement. It didn't go well 100%, but it's still something that started the success we see today in our schools. We'll talk about the linguistic side of. What about the cultural side of things? We talk about the language, but what about? Is there something that allowed you, for example, to feel pride for your culture, something that is present in your life, an event, an activity, something? If I can carry on, but for the culture, for myself, it's easier to keep a culture because since we come from a family of 12 children, the little ones that come along, we've always celebrated the holidays, a special occasion where we use the French culture. We have French dishes. So the culture for me is much easier to keep at home than the language when you go to an Anglophone area. It's an additional challenge. Joselle? When I was young, I've always felt proud to speak French, to be fransaskoise, but really in working in a culture center Maya, I worked there 2 years, and doing cultural activities, and then by offering an event, I can't remember what show, but the fact that I saw people having fun in French, the elders, the adults, the small children dancing, and to see on the face how they react towards this celebration of culture, it was. It elevated really my pride in what I do. I'm convinced that I would always want to be part of these people of that culture.
I'm going to go out to the audience in a moment and ask that question. But if anybody wants to think about it, that we have a portable mic with Frederick that will come to you. But just before I've had the opportunity to work with Betty a lot, and she has experienced many different things in her different situations, working at various schools and things like that. And that I think is something I would like to ask her. Have you always been proud of your identity and your culture? And what were the things that happened that made you less proud, perhaps?
Well, I have to say I've always been proud of my culture, my heritage. I had very proud grandmothers, and they taught me who I was. And I believe if you learn from somebody who really loves you and cares for you, that no matter what anybody says to you, it doesn't matter, because you know that person, the person that told you in the first place, was right. So I had that to propel me into the world. And my grandmother would always say to me, remember that it's the French and the Indian that is Métis. She said, you can be French and Swedish and they're not Métis. You can be French and Chinese and you're not Métis. She said, remember, don't forget the Indian woman that was instrumental in the picture of making a child Métis. And with that in mind, we knew that both worlds are open to us to do whatever we want. We have that. We have the French initiative to start things for ourselves, and we also had that drive to know that we can accomplish things on our own, and on our own as Métis people. We're still, I always used to hear the word, you're just one of the pack, because I come from a family of 10. So as one of the pack, we knew that you help one another, and what you learned out there you took home and helped the younger ones, so that when they got into situations where people, whether they meant it intentionally or not intentionally, to make you feel lesser than a person from where you come from. And we always had the ability to rise above whatever somebody put on our plate, as people would call it racist, and say we could take it back home and get rid of it, close the door, and it's out there, but at home we regenerate ourselves. We talk to our parents, we talk to one another, we talk to our aunties, our uncles, or visit our older uncles and aunties wherever they were, and find that balance again of, being proud of who we were. And now when I work in the schools, I find that children need to have that base that I had. They need to have a significant person who says to them, you are Métis. That gives you both worlds. You go and you can do it. And I'm very proud of my granddaughter, Carrie Bourassa. She is now Dr. Carrie Bourassa. And this young lady has a lot of get up and go. She's done many wonderful things. And I'd like to think that I'm that significant other that's propelled her out there to say, you can go, you can do this. And I think that if we're looking to the future of our young, and to know what I got from my grandmothers and my mother and father, is that we have a unique place in the world. a very unique place that other people can't be. But we can show them how to get to where they need to go by letting us do the things we need to do as Métis people and being proud of that heritage of being Métis. And for the young people who are coming into the schools, it would be great if we could have more Métis people in there who are saying, this is our culture. This is the way we did things. And it would be great if we had a Métis school where kids could go and they could learn. You know, Michif isn't just, there's different kinds of Michif. Manitoba has a couple of different types of Michif as opposed to what we have in Saskatchewan. And I think we should have a place where children can learn that. We certainly have places where children can go learn French. And we are neither French-speaking people nor just Cree or Soto or Ojibwe-speaking people. There's a mixture of languages that we speak that developed in our communities that we lived in that was called Michif. And if we had those things that we could give to our young, I think we'd see a much better world than what we had. They wouldn't have the struggles that we have. They would have, I think they would have a better grasp at a younger age of where they can go in the world. Because I've seen so many of my neighbors, the people I grew up around, who struggled with it, and they didn't have the strength that my mother had. They didn't have the strength that their what do you call it, their communities, their family members weren't as strong. And sometimes I think that their family members didn't even believe in it, you know.
Thank you, Betty. Frederick, can we go find somebody in the audience that would like to perhaps enhance that question, if they got something to comment on it, or perhaps redirect to somebody? And have you always felt proud about who you were in your community and your identity? And what are those things that didn't make you feel so proud about your community? And, or what are those things that helped you get it back? Could you be so kind to introduce yourself, sir?
Paul Dubé, I am Franco-Manitoban. I live in Alberta for a long time. I want to say two things. First of all, I want to talk about who we are in the history of Canada. We are not only a minority who lived, but yes, it's true. We just lived. But there's a very, very important. We're very important in the Francophone history. We are responsible of this, the fundamental characteristic that creates Canada, where there is, in this country where there's place for somebody else. You know, we can go back to the Royal Proclamation that removes all our rights. We insisted to keep our rights in 1674 with the Act of Quebec. We gave us certain rights. In 91, we really it became official. We had two entities, independent, of course, within Confederation in 67. So the whole story of Canada is created on this come and go, the trying to remove rights that we have, and the resistance that we created to avoid that. We fought against assimilation. So we must say that the First Nation, the Métis, also were involved. If it hadn't been for the Francophone that resisted to the end, and if you think of the John A. Macdonald's discourse on the Confederation, what he wanted unity in his government. He wanted it's easier to have instead of a federation, because the powers, the rights that allowed these communities in Quebec to have rights that were independent of the federal government. So for me, it is one of the fundamental dimension that a part of the history. Those are things that we don't know or that we cannot communicate to our children, so that they could say, well, we have defined the basic character of our country. That's one thing. The second thing is the language itself. We talk language that is a beautiful language. It's a language that we brag about everywhere. Many countries have accepted as national language, official language. And I want to cite from a book published in 1994 by Patrick Samoiseau from the Institut, and in that book that won a prize. So it's a good quality. So in that book, he talked about a person that is a shoemaker, that he finds, that discovers the French language. He starts to juggle around with the word, and he loves the sound, the style, the rhythm, everything. So what he loves is this language to a point where he decides to become a professor. He wants to communicate this beauty, this knowledge, this sound to children. And of course, he keeps on learning this language. He becomes a professor, and this writer says, I will try and cite here. It was a passage of, here's what he says. But talk French was for him as something absolutely special in the movement. To hear him speak, you would think that he was leading a herd of not a herd, but a group of singers. We talk about ceremony of succulence, and so I would like to try together to find ways to communicate this aspect of the language, this beauty of the language, with all this nuance, these possibility, and that we create a system, a school system. We can do it because the Supreme Court said that we can do it, and we could define this capability to define the program, the language that we can communicate to our children, so we can what the importance that French came to this professor that was once a shoemaker. There are others in the room who would like to contribute, would like to share. You talked about a rebellious person. I must say that I think I understand what the question is. I have to say I was rebel, because when I come from a small Bellevue, surrounded by Francophone, when I left Bellevue, I ended up in Prince Albert for 11 years. I was among Anglophone, and I started to lose my culture. And it felt like, even if I was proud when I was young, because my parents really, they were both Francophone, but I have to say, must say that I was afraid to lose my language, because I was with Anglophones all the time. I would learn French. I would speak French only when my parents came, or my brother and sister. But it wasn't until I moved to Saskatoon that I started to get involved with Ribambelle, Troupe du Jour, do theater in French, to surround myself with Francophone friends, and to find once again my culture, my French culture, and to also I traveled to New Brunswick. I went to study about 6 months at the University of Moncton, and then again I saw, because my mother's side of the family, they're Canadians, and I saw the pride in these people that we didn't have. Even at Bellevue, we didn't have that pride. So that made a whole difference for me. I really realized, it's a moment where I started to get involved more and more in the French activities, not just in Saskatoon, but outside of Saskatoon. I started to meet other people outside of Saskatoon. These people, that's where I found my pride again to be a Francophone. Is that what you wanted? I didn't lose it. I thought I had lost everything, but I had never lost it. But it's really when we are a minority situation where we push ourselves a little bit more to, I don't want to say that I lost, but I hadn't lost it. I didn't hear what she said. It's a risky situation, but there was a time. I was always been proud to be Francophone. There was a time where I wasn't as proud, but I was always proud.
Okay, we're going to change gears and go back to the panel a little bit. Oh, one more? Okay. Not a problem.
I will try to make it brief. My name is Suzanne Campagne, and I wanted to say something. I will say it in English because I wanted to say something that is particularly maybe pertinent for our meeting here this weekend. I grew up here. I went to school in that place, and we talk a lot about languages, and I can say that when I was at school here, I was of a French language, so the nuns really liked the way that Les Campagnes spoke. We were always sort of like the teacher's pets because we spoke very good French. And I have a very good friend of mine who is de souche québécoise, who will not speak to me in French to this day because she doesn't feel that she speaks a good enough French, although she speaks very well. And we also went to school with Métis kids. And I can really relate to Monsieur Pelletier when you said, that language was lost, and it's not very difficult to know why that language was lost. Because, there were different levels of French, and there were different levels of society, you could say. And I've always been very proud of my roots and my French. But at one point, when I moved to Quebec, it was the first time that I would speak French and they would speak to me in English. And it's the first time that I felt, okay, this is what it feels like to not be good enough. This was the first time that I felt that, not speaking well enough. And I really got what that meant for a lot of people. I later, I've sang with the group Heart Rouge, and I wrote a song named Danny Gaudry. It's a song named Danny Gaudry, and it was sort of a, saying, there was a lot of unfairness. There's a lot of unfairness, at that time, in the way that we were educated and how the Métis kids were, I think, set aside. They were always part of our gang, but there was always little things that would set them apart. And it was the first time that I felt that I was not proud of my culture because I had been a part of that. I had been a part of that. Just by being the favorite, I had been a part of that. And I wrote that song to sort of point out that unfairness. And I wrote the song to sort of apologize for, the part that I had played in that. So I think this is great, because I think that these discussions, we probably don't go enough to the nitty-gritty, but I think that this forum is fantastic to really start unrevealing, a lot of the hurt that was done. So I think that this is a great meeting, and I want to congratulate everyone who's been part of it. Just wanted to say that. Thank
you. Would any of our panel members like to respond to that? That's a very good point, a very good question. Randy would like to respond to that.
Yes, I would like to respond to that. and thank you for that. You know, the hurt that's gone on in our community it's taken its toll on the Métis people and some of the French people too. A lot of you people aren't from here. I don't know if you're familiar with the history of Willow Bunch, a book that was wrote in the 1920s by a French Catholic priest, and this is one man's version. It was republished in 1970, not that many years ago, translated in English, and it was just wrote verbatim, and it was the only history book that people had of Willow Bunch and the area. And I'd just like to read a couple of, this was wrote in, like I say, in 1920s. This was a view of people of the time. It would have been nice if something would have been wrote in there saying that was a view of one person or people of that time. But, you know, it's not the view of people today, but unfortunately it was of some people, and it was very hurtful, and there's a lot of healing that has to go on. It says here, like, the Métis have played a prominent role in the history of Willow Bunch. Therefore, it is important to better understand what follows, to have a few notations regarding these people. Related to the Indians, they are, however, superior in all aspects. We know what the Métis are. They are of mixed blood. Most of them are born of a white father and an Indian mother or a Métis mother. Many are of Scottish descent. Most of them have a French-Canadian father and thus have names commonly found in the province of Quebec. We would therefore be wise not to despise these poor people. And this was the only reference they had of our people until very recently in our school libraries, in the library in town. Another little excerpt in here is many of them are irascible, inconsistent, wasteful, and love alcoholic beverages. They cannot work consistently, nor can they adapt themselves to a routine of life. They cannot earn their living by organized labor such as farming or business. Usually they become easy prey to the European settlers that unscrupulously buy their land for a piece of bread or a bottle of whiskey and thus reduce them to a miserable existence. And that's just a couple of excerpts that were in here. And like I said, it was a book that was wrote in the 1920s, republished 1970. When I moved back to Willow Bunch and I became the president of the local, unfortunately when I sat on some boards, a lot of this stereotyping and thinking was still there about the Métis. And it really disturbed me, and I sat on some boards and I was very rudely treated by some of the people in town. And I was even accused at one point of diverting money from one project for us, and I was never apologized or for that. You know, I proved I was innocent on this. But one thing we did do was we called the History of Willow Bunch, the history of the Métis of Willow Bunch, and it was a book that we felt we had to write to write some of the things that have been said wrong about our Métis people, because they were a people that really were proud, and they did contribute a lot to this part of the world. And as a Métis local, we have been going about 12 years. We've had a lot of ups and downs. There are some things that are happening in town that can help all of us. Guys like Henry Bouvier, now working with the Francophone in town, a man I feel we can work with, level-headed. The prejudices on both sides have got to come down, and I think we can work together, and we're going to get into that workshop a little bit tomorrow. But you know, for you to say, and you know, that you're sorry about how things went, that's nice to hear in a way where people nowadays we don't have to say, oh, you poor people, what can we do, what, you know, none of that. We don't We don't need the pity. We just need the respect that we deserve and our ancestors deserve, and vice versa. We have to respect you people too. And I think that's a way we can start getting along and maybe working together in some of these areas and regions. But there's been a lot of hurt in this community alone. Like we're talking about, it's a roundtable discussion. So we're not going to sugarcoat anything. And there's been a lot of things that were said, like even that book, not that many years ago, when the internet, that was on a web page, word for word. And I went to a couple of the organizations and said, you've got to take this off our website, off your website. 2 reasons. The way it slanders our Métis people and the racist things that are said. And the other, we live in this town in Willow Bunch. And other people around the world are going to read this thing. And they're going to think we are the most racist people going. Or how do we do things? So that finally came down. For years, Jean-Louis Laguerre was touted as the founder of Willow Bunch, the great be-all and end-all, and he did a lot in this community. He really did. However, the Métis people contributed even more than he did, I feel. And things that were wrote, he was touted as the founder of Willow Bunch. At one meeting, I said, you know, we've got to reword this. We've got to cut this out, the founder of Willow Bunch. He was a co-founder. You know, there was 35 Métis families living here when they asked him to come and stay and start a store. And I had one gentleman get up from the Francophone community, and he said, but he was the first civilized one. And that really hurt. And those kinds of things have got to stop in our community, and that's the only way we are going to go ahead and do things, okay? So that's on both sides, and I'd like some comments on that.
I'd like to know if anybody else would like to make some comments. Gilbert.
I'd like to respond to that lady, and I'd like to thank her. When she said, you know, she mentioned that, you know, she was the teacher's pet because she was able to speak French. And for me, it was just the opposite. We couldn't speak our language. You know, people wonder why we lost it. We couldn't even speak our language in school. When we went to school, the strap was handy for us. They had that strap handy. That's, you know, if you said one word in your language, then that strap comes into play. And you know, the man was big. The man was bigger than Calvin. And you know, when you're just about 70 pounds, you know, you don't want that big fella to come after you with that strap because he was able to hit hard. You know, but I you know, that's where you are fortunate that you were able to speak your language in school, but we couldn't. You know, that's why today we're losing it. We're losing our language because we couldn't even speak it in school, even to one another.
I know there's anybody who'd like to add something. The experience which you, Suzanne, had. It's not the experience for all Francophones in the province. When I asked if there was somebody who was the only one in the family who speak French to keep their culture, I had a friend who was one of 8 children. She was the only one that still speaks and lives in French. So I don't understand that. Why you didn't manage, how you succeeded. For my brothers and sisters, they spoke French when they came to school at 5 years of age, and all the punitions, la brosse, for the board was thrown at their head because they didn't know how to speak English. And so that's why we have so many former Francophones. And it's probably an unfortunate history that we share, but in some communities, we should congratulate the forebears who managed to keep the language. But it's a very sad story that we are sharing with many of you. So, what was a complicated story, Gilbert?
just a little bit different. And, now go to our young people in our communities, and get your thoughts as a panel and as adults who are responsible and involved in the raising of our young. How do you think our young people feel about their community, their culture, their history? Do you feel that they share the pride that they should, or are they less proud? Are they more proud? Any thoughts on that?
Gilbert passed me the microphone. I guess he wants me to say something.
Sounds like a good one. Yes, you gave a good comment earlier. That would.
I think I'll address this in English to start off with. As a teacher, I spent 24 years teaching in immersion. In my classes, there were children of Francophone descent who could not speak it before they came back into the immersion system. There were children of Métis descent who would not acknowledge that they were Métis, who would deny if somebody said something. Well, that name, I'm sure that's a Métis name. Like, oh no, we're not. And so over the years, I'm proud to say that I took the role of saying, you have to be proud of that, regardless of what your background is, what your culture is. You have to be proud of who you are, and keep on going. And over the years, I've had some successes, and like everybody else, there have been other instances where it didn't succeed, and where all the work that I did was trying to convince them was lost because other influences were stronger. It's difficult to maintain pride in any culture if it is looked down upon. That's what I found.
When I went to my small country school, I knew right away about all about multiculturalism, because there were around us several families who were of French ancestry like us, but they're also on the farms in the area. There were several English-speaking people from England. There were two families who came from Norwegian. There were German families, and together we went to the same little school, but it was the only one that was in the neighborhood. And in class, we spoke English, all of us. But even if in our homes we spoke other languages, because it was understood that was what we would speak. They did not have the opportunity that I had. We had the right to some teaching in French after school. They didn't have that, so they almost all lost their native, not their culture, but certainly their language. We kept it, fortunately, in spite of everything, but nobody denigrated the others because they were different, because we were all different. And I think that this made it possible for me to really appreciate nobody is better, nobody is worse than anybody else. And that's how you live. It's how you live your life that counts, who you are. It's the morality you pass on, the openness that we have towards others, which makes us who we are, which makes us more proud of being who we are. Thank you. If I could continue on the same theme, I think we're talking about the communities. Are the communities more or less proud than they were previously? I had a discussion with Peter the other day. We're dealing with that subject. When I in my youth in New Brunswick, we never heard about the Acadians. They were in my area, but in 2004 it went back. There's a big festival everywhere. And how many people here know the Métis flag? That's pretty good. Pretty good. How many other people know the fransaskoise flag? A bit less, perhaps, among the Métis people. There they are. You can't see them very well here, but I see that we have about 20 years ago, the Acadians, for their community pride is coming. And it was hidden before. That's my impression. But do you think that the communities, Métis and Francophone communities, are more proud or less than they were before? What do you see in your own communities? Henri, I haven't heard much from you lately. What do you think? Henri was very well behaved. And going back to my roots, what I knew at Willow Bunch as a child was a French community, a Métis community, and then a Métis name, which was Métis. I never knew that. When I came back here, later on I went to Manitoba. I worked with Native people and Métis people. When I came back here to Willow Bunch, what struck me the most was that I felt that the Métis Nation hesitated to say who it was in the marketplace. I didn't see the Métis flag unless I went to the Métis Local. I think that the best way I can summarize that is that, for me, pride, which I'd like to help the Métis Nation to establish it at Willow Bunch, that's we heard yesterday. I heard it for the first time last year at Batoche. The hymn, the national anthem of the Métis. That's yours. We have to sing it, proclaim it. When they had our evaluations, I'd like to stress that the words next time or the next round table, I'd like to have those recommendations because I found them what I was able to understand quickly. It'd be very interesting to pass that around. Are there any others who have a perception through the years of the pride in the community? Are we starting to win a bit? What are we doing? What do we see?
I'd like to ask Joanna or Dorothy. Both of them are very active at the Métis community level. What do you think? Are our communities getting stronger? Are they losing? Are they getting less proud of who they are, or do they forget who they are? Would one of you care to respond to that?
Well, in my community, I guess the biggest culture stuff, if we want it, we got to put it on ourselves or get a grant from Dumont so it can help us along. But there's more of an interest. Our young people are getting very interested in starting dance groups and stuff like that. So hopefully, in a while, we might be able to get more things going. And I guess if we're waiting for our leaders to show us the way, we might as well sit there. So we will be doing it on ourselves at local levels. And also when I was working in field store as a cashier in Melville, I had quite a bit of prejudice that was happening there. People would come in and when I'd go to the till to put them through, they'd say, well, you have someone else working here, don't you? And I'd say, yes, she's in the back doing the bookwork, and it's me you gotta be. And they'd wait 3 hours before they'd go through the till for me. Yes. And so that's still going on, a lot of prejudice in the world yet. But when they do that, I get almost stubborn and stand there anyway. I would have stood at that hill today yet. That was 10 years ago.
I'm going to bounce back to Randy's question a little bit. Randy sort of said, how can we now, he put some things that were solid on the table, some situations he felt had happened, and I suppose we need to sort of, maybe Henri could help me. And so what are the things that now we can move forward? What can the French community now say, what can we do to start remedy some of these things? Or what can the Métis community say, what can we do now to hold out our hands to start remedying some of these situations? What are those things that we can, what are those olive branches we can extend? Any thoughts on some of those things?
I think the experience that I had 2 years ago, or 2005, going to the first round table, I went there not knowing what it was, but just because it was on the Franco-Métis, well, this is, I'm trying to take my identity of Willow Bunch. It rubs off on you. It is a Métis community, Francophone. And I think when I went there, it awakened this pride, if you want. And when I came back, I says, the only regret I have is that I did not see any of my cohorts, Métis from Willow Bunch there. And that's when I volunteered to sit on the committee, organizing committee, to say, at one time or other, that damn round table is going to come home. And that's where we're at today. And that is one of those first steps, where we can reach across the table, tell each other what we have to tell each other, and then say, together, let's work for the future. It's ours. Damn it. Let's work and make it what we want it to be. That's what I hope we do.
Thank you. Any other?
Thank you, Henri. I'd like a microphone.
One of the singers from Willow Bunch, I do a lot of singing, church or whatever, find me the music to the Métis anthem and I'll be proud to sing it. Okay? Okay?
I just like to say, Henry, when you first heard the Métis, national anthem, when you heard the Métis national anthem, I guess that's one of my proudest moments. When I got involved as a political leader with the Métis, I went to a conference in Saskatchewan, and that's the first time I seen them walk in with the flags and our anthem, and that really instilled something in me to be proud, and it really, I was always taught to be proud, but hearing that anthem really, really did something for me. And it's people like yourself, you have the same aspirations that we do, in a way where we're from Willow Bunch, we love this valley, we love what's going on here in a lot of ways, and I think we can work together, put the past behind us, stop the racism, and work together on some things. It's not going to be a happy dance. It's going to be a long old road maybe in some ways. But, it's people like yourself in the Francophone community that have held out the olive branch. Thank you.
I want to jog back to a little memory I had. I remember I had the rare privilege many, many years ago while working for Gabriel Dumont Institute to write some books, some booklets on the history of the Métis people in Saskatchewan. And took me nearly 2 years to produce these little booklets, and I worked very hard, many hours, and sweated lots and questioned myself so much. And upon completion of it, I had the opportunity to go to Batoche, set up a little booth, and there I'm sitting in the hot sun with my little books at this booth, and this old gentleman from my community, I don't know his name, But he was one of the elders, came up and he took a few minutes and he fished through it. And he says, "Did you write these, boy?" I said, "I did." He said, "Good." And he walked away. And to me, that when you're talking about pride, I think that was one of the most proudest moments of my whole entire life. I have no idea who this gentleman was, but that really made me dig down, and it made that 2 years very worthwhile. And I think a lot of young people who get the opportunity to work and to achieve success and to research and write about their history and put those things forward get to feel those things. And our community sometimes doesn't always know how to react to these young people. They think these young people are much too smart for me now or whatever, but those young people, I think, really need the support of the community to let them know that they are valuable and they've added lots to their community. And it's very important, significant work that they have done, and they need to continue to build those things and to continue to develop that pride and that sort of stuff. Oh,
Yes,
I just sparked something on Joanna.
I have something to say, and I think that all our Métis and the whole communities all over Saskatchewan, Manitoba, Alberta, wherever they are, raise their flags, get them up flying.
I think that Betty said something that was very important when she talked about sometime in the life of a child, it can take one person, key person, and Jenny mentioned it sort of, and say, it's okay who you are. It's very important who you are. I shared a story myself with the roundtable when we were getting ready. I said, I come from Quebec. My son's been in Saskatchewan since he was 3 months old. I moved to PA when he was in grade 3. He went to visit Batoche with his aunt, and next day the teacher says, "We like Batoche." Yes, yes. And who is Métis? And everybody raised the hand except my son. He started to cry. He said, "It's not fair. I'm not Métis. I want to be Métis like why I'm not a Métis?" And I said, I wasn't raised in Saskatchewan, but I think that my generation maybe wouldn't have said it, but there is the hope to be Métis. It's something important. I cannot make you Métis, but I can make you are Francophone. You can be proud to be Francophone. It's another part of our shared story. We must make our young proud. Do we have time for another question, or how are we doing for time here?
It's about 5:30, whoops, I got this. I'm talking to myself, and I'm talking in English, and it's coming to me in French. I said, okay. So, okay, way to go, Calvin. It's about 5:30, and we're just starting to cook. We really, in some ways, but my ear is very sore. But Peter says we got a little more time. We'd like to keep going a little bit, and that's just simply awesome. So, go ahead, Barbara, if you got one ready on the tip of your tongue that you want to ask.
What I'd like to do, I'd like to ask something. The hands were up. We didn't have a chance to see everybody. A lady in red wanted to comment something. Frédéric? The lady on the front row? I believe that there are certain thoughts or ideas that were provoked. So, Jo Poirier would have something to say also. The famous history book of Willow Bunch. I am a historian. I'm a genealogist. I am a Métis who did not know that I was a Métis until I was about 30 years old. The history, the story, written, it's a point of view.
And it's so important to rectify the facts. And therefore it's so important for books to be written like Calvin wrote. And it's so important for people like Randy Godary to say this is not acceptable to be shown to the world. We can all do that. We can all participate in that, in rectifying the facts.
I'm Joe Poirier de Bellegarde, and I have to tell you a short story of how I met Métis people. We were 11 in my family. I was the third youngest, so I was a very shy man, always shy. And what happened is my father hired Alice McGuinness, I think, he came from Willow Bunch, but for me, Willow Bunch didn't mean anything because we never left the house. I just started school, and my father hired this man. This man spoke French, but on evening, as a custom, we would talk, saying the rosary. That man, I wondered, I thought it was different color. We weren't used to that. So he would come and say the rosary. He was a pious man. He was really religious. We'd finish the rosary. I would wonder, my father would say, it's a man. He's got really faith. He's a Métis. That's all he said. So I said, well, he's not the same color. Where does he come from? But so he continued. He married a girl, Francophone, and I went to school with his children, and he had 5 or 6. For the Francophone, he did his part. And when we started to play ball at the school, and they were playing ball with us, and there was a real strong team, almost all Francophone. So we're going against Saint-Lazare, many Métis. We got along well with them. They spoke French, and what happened is that we hired somebody that was a pitcher, that was Métis. We'd never had that in Bellegarde, but he was good. He was really capable. It was scary. It was real good. We started to play. We had picnic every Sunday when it was a tournament, and we'd go to the finals, and we were always hoping that he was in good shape. We'd win the game. So for us in our area of life, the Métis were special people. They were good baseball players. They really prayed. They were good in the parish. And so I'm just really surprised here. So for me, I feel quite innocent, naive, because I always felt. So now that one, I have a brother-in-law who married a Métis woman. She's pretty little thing. I'm really happy to have her in the family, but it hurts me a bit that I didn't know the whole history. It was not written, or something lacked in my education somewhere in the school in Bellegarde, because I had never heard anything bad against the Métis. I never said anything bad about them either, because we had everything we had with the Métis people. It was very positive. And at Saint-Lazare, we went to Saint-Lazare, and Saint-Lazare came to see us. We were proud to have them as our friends. Merci. Thank you, Joe. There's a monsieur, I don't know your name. René Bénard, Saint-Rémy. I'm 75 years old, and I didn't know that Métis had a flag. I'm curious, what does it look like? I want to see it. Henri is very tall. He can't just go and stretch over there.
There's lots of history to that flag. One of the projects after I wrote those official first little 5 booklets, I got several phone calls at our library at Dumont Institute. Got several phone calls from people saying, "What can you tell us about those flags?" And I got sick of the librarian transferring the phone messages to me. So I finally one day I decided I got to do something about this. And so I started reading and researching, and I found that there wasn't just one flag. There was many different flags that the Métis people used. Some of them were buffalo hunters, so they'd have a buffalo on their flag. Some of them were very strong French-speaking Catholic buffalo hunters. They'd have a buffalo and they'd have a cross, and then they'd have the French harp or the fleur-de-lis, and then some of them had Irish connections. They had a harp or a shamrock on them, and they had all kinds of strange ones. Some were blue, some were red, had many different connotations. So I ran across every one, I published every one, and got pictures of every one that I had, and used every one. This one was the first one, and the original was a red flag, and it was a gift actually given to Cuthbert Grant in 1816, right after. The history books call it the massacre at Seven Oaks because it was one that the Métis had won. And we say, no, it was a skirmish. We finally won one, right? And so it was given as a gift to Cuthbert, and that was where they say our Métis nationalism was born. And we had a historian, a poet, and a singer. His name was Pierre Falcon. And Pierre Falcon in French. They got a lake named after him in Ontario or eastern Manitoba. And he sang a song about the proud and Métis bras brûlés who this glorious day rode out of the ground and became this proud nation, and et cetera, et cetera. And they rode around the countryside with this flag. Well, the government used that flag as the means to identify these culprits and took them to court for doing a misdeed to those poor Canadian soldiers. But the Métis people eventually said, well, heck, we don't like red anyway because it's the color of the Hudson Bay Company, and we didn't like them guys, so we like blue better, so they changed it to blue. And the infinity sign, of course, is about our people are ongoing. Our people are continuous. Our people are never ending. That's our belief. Our culture will continue. Our struggle will continue. We are enduring. Also, the Réal Reelers are here, and later we'll probably be dancing a quadrille. If you watch that quadrille, you'll see that infinity sign in there. And that's also part of it. So it's an incorporation of our culture and our music and our dances. So anyway, it is something that we fly. The Métis Nation have a variation of it. They've got a white buffalo on it. They've got a prairie lily. You go to Manitoba, they've got their own addition to it. Alberta has their own to it. So they've created their own variations. But us at the community level hold that one close to our hearts and are very proud of it. And one of the greatest feelings I have is when I go to a community, a Métis community, more so we see them in the north as opposed to the south. You'll go along and all of a sudden you see 6 or 8 or 10 of them flying in the community above businesses or above people's houses. They got them there, and you say, awesome. And it's really a gratifying feeling. And it's an important thing that if, we generate that interest and generate that pride. And the flag is one of the vehicles that does it. Sorry for being long-winded.
It's good, but I would like to say the same thing with the fransaskoise flag. I don't know if the president of FDF would like to talk about our flag, or do you want to delegate this? Could somebody please stretch this flag so people can see it? Thank you, Calvin. It was very interesting. You're gonna talk about it, Michel? I was saying that I'm not the person to describe the fransaskoise flag, but in the room, I believe there are 2 or 3 many people that could best describe. I would like to ask maybe Suzanne. So the reason why I think about her is that I know that, as we said yesterday, the fransaskoise flag came out in 1979 in the Association des Fransaskois Youth. Fransaskois Youth. Laurier Charlier aussi knows the meaning and the symbols on the flag. So, but I believe I want somebody to do a better job than I could ever do. We'll do it together. Of course, the colors of the three colors. Yellow is wheat, the prairies in south of Saskatchewan. The green is the forest of the north of Saskatchewan. The cross, of course, it means the Catholic faith. The faith of most Francophone, French Canadian that still have as a belief, and of course, fleur de lis in red, we call it, Suzanne and I, this fleur de lis of Louriel. There's a quite link of the fransaskoise lis and the symbolism and the importance with the Métis people. Thank you. Thank you, Français, Suzanne, Michel. There's a work done in collaboration. Henri wanted to say a couple of words.
Over the weekend, we're given these little pins here. And if you look closely, it is comprised of the infinity symbol of the Métis and the fleur de lis francophone. Yep. What better symbol than what we have for the round table?
Mr. Leonard.
Today, and can you hear me?
Yep, you go right ahead.
And you see, like the phone and the Métis, I'm both. I'm proud of both. But I think that one of the problems is, and nobody seems to want to say it, was the church that caused a lot of problems in these, on both sides of the coin. That's what I read and seen. Like, I never experienced it myself, but what I've seen and heard older people say, that's kind of what I was getting at, that was brought to, they got the two sides sort of against each other. So I just thought maybe the panel might have something to say on that.
It's very important, interesting that you say that, because Ken had started something on that, and then we were talking about that earlier. We talked about the different perception of the church.
I just like to refer to the book Randy referred to, and I, over the last couple of days, I knew I was coming down here. I read the introduction and got a very good history of Willow Bunch, a nice introduction to it. Then I went, and the next 5 or 6 chapters were a great deal of the history of the Métis people in Manitoba, Saskatchewan, a regurgitation of 1867 and 1869 and 1885 and all that stuff. Then I found the last chapter to be absolutely fascinating. And it talked a lot about how, of course, when Métis people established the community and came here, that the church, of course, accompanied the Métis buffalo hunters who came here, and this was one of their buffalo hunting camps. And as a result of that, established the Métis as their flock. And over a course of a few short years, Louis Réal and company opposed the Canadian government in Manitoba and took up arms demanding rights to their land. As a result of that, what ended up happening was, of course, the formation of Manitoba as a province. Then, a little later, they did it in Batoche. The priest, as I said this morning, that was in charge of all this was Father Taché, who oversaw Western Canada and all the priests, and was not very impressed with Louis Réal. And as a result of that, his personal agenda was to not for the Métis people not to be the chosen flock, and he encouraged settlement of people from Quebec to come here and to establish, to work with the community and to create a French community. And then when they did that, he established a church, run school with Catholic language, Catholic or Christian religion and French language in the school, and promoted and supported it. And of course, when Saskatchewan became a province in 1905, the Canadian government, or the Saskatchewan government, supported that as well. And the Métis people simply got pushed to the side. And so it became a very strong church agenda to establish their own community and to maintain their own community and to have a flock that they could, I don't want to say control, but certainly that they could supervise and take care of and to work with, and that they could trust and rely on. And they didn't perceive that to be the Métis community, they perceived that to be the French community. And as a result of that, over the history of many, many years, the Métis people simply got pushed aside and never were allowed to have their rightful place in their own community. And, you know, being a historian myself, I've quickly realized that more people have died in the name of religion than any other thing else in the history of the world. And religion plays a very strong role in it, and people continue to get killed every day because of it in many countries. And it's certainly, if we think it hasn't affected us, I think we really need to reassess that agenda and look at that and say certainly has played a role. It has played a role here, it continues to play a role, and it will play a role in the future. And it's important, I think, that we just say, yes, it has, we recognize that, and it's important that we say, okay, that's fine, but it shouldn't be our only agenda. And it's important that we continue to say, it is who we are, it's part of where we came from, but it's not where we're going. And the church is a very valuable part of our community. And from my perspective, and from the Métis community, it's been our savior, and it's also been our detriment in the past. The church has worked very hard to maintain a flock, and in my case, the community, like in Lebret, worked very, very hard to have a congregation. And then, certainly because the community of Lebret supported Louis Riel at Batoche, they were ostracized from the church until they apologized and they paid a fine of $25 back to the church to be admitted back. And then they said, we will readmit the backslides and we'll forgive you for your mistakes. And that shouldn't be that way. So the church certainly has played a prominent role in the history of my community, and I know it's played a strong history in the role of the French community. And like one of the ladies had said last Saturday, that the church is certainly the backbone of the French community, and I recognize that and support that. And it has been the backbone of many in my community. And a lot of our people are supposed to say, they don't want to speak out against it because they're afraid they're going to go to hell if they do. I think that's another component that still affects us, because we're still not sure. So that's sort of my rant on that topic.
Merci. Henri a parlé de quelque chose que j'aimerais passer la parole à un francophone. Quand tu parlais de pourquoi when you said why you were proud and you name a few things, able to pray in French, and already I've been here for 16 years. I come from Quebec. There was only the church in the 50s. And now the pendulum is at the other end of the spectrum. French people here really have a special feeling for the church. I wonder if it's people lived in a period where there was only courses at SCFC, where the French could only spoken in the parish, or who could talk about the importance between the parish and the French community. The different perception that for them it was, you were talking about c'était notre sauveur, mais aussi que ça nous causait des problèmes for certain people in the communities. Would there be somebody who would like to talk about it? I see a hand. Robert Thierien. Robert Thierien, I come from Willow Bunch. I left 13 years ago. For me, the history that the role of church in the creation of communities, because it was the priest at the time of would it be for the good or bad of the developing community, they were entrepreneurs, they were businessmen, they were people that wanted to help with the education, that wanted to keep the belief, the faith. I know that I'm ex-president of the parish council in Willow Bunch, and I was I worked in sharing my faith all my life. I was talking to Randy today, but the history here is when we were here at some point, when we looked behind the history about all the church document, many of those documents on the parish were in French. until maybe Henri would know, maybe 30 years or 35 years ago, when they started to document things in English. It was interesting to see that the development of community, but also to see in a parish that it was a majority. When we talk about links, of the link between language and culture and the faith. When we look back to history, we've got all the documentation. Majority of that history was in French in this community. And I believe that, yes, in terms of development, the Roundtable, I wasn't at Batoche, I was not available 2 years ago, but I really wanted to come here today. But I believe that beyond this Roundtable, we have to go ahead. We have to go further. It's good to discuss. Yes, it's important to pull out the wrong and the good that has happened in the past, but we have to go ahead as community, as two communities, and we must find ways, concrete ways, to share a vision for a future for this community, for other community in the south, between Métis and Francophones, and the present has to be strong enough. We should be able to do it.
The president of the local Métis Council, and I think there's opportunities for all of us to move forward. And yes, we have to talk about the past to be able to move forward in the future, but we also have to learn to forgive and move on. And we have to forget that, because we were not necessarily part of that, although Suzanne went to school with you, yes. Although we were part of what was going on, we weren't aware of what had happened either. And over the years, I've learned a lot about the history of the Métis and some of the suffering that has gone on. And the interpretation of history, too, becomes an individual or certain people that want to write, and sometimes it's not always the correct information. The lady that brought forward that let's get the facts out, let's get what happened, but let's turn the page, let's move on, and we have to do that as community. We talked about demographics earlier and the changes going on, and certainly in rural Saskatchewan, if we don't learn to work together, and if we don't want to work together, we're going to face even more difficulty.
Robert.
I'd just like to sort of comment on, I was talking to Len the other day, and he was talking about how, he said he talked to his son about this very issue, and about, he says, the community, and how do the kids experience in the community? And the kid says, oh, we don't have those issues as much anymore. We get along well. We don't look down each other's nose at each other because we're French or because we're Métis. We get along, the kids work together quite well in this community, and appreciate that. And I really appreciate your comment about we must get on with it, we must move forward, we must put those issues aside, we must build those fences and build those bridges and well, Randy calls it extend the olive branch and work together. And we only get one kick at the cat, we only go around once, and we deserve to live as good as we can and to help each other and to look out for each other, because we are our brother's keepers.
I think Janine Gouillet had one last comment that she'd like to share with us.
Calvin, if I might paraphrase what you said, I had an uncle who was an oblate father. And I can't remember how many times I heard him say when I was younger, too many times in history, religion has been the worst enemy of the faith, because they are two very, very different things.
In my community at the moment, in Lisieux, we were considered as a French community, but so we approached us often to drive, to have our religious services in French, and we insisted that we should do something like that. But through the years, there was only 1 or 2 or 3 families which understood French, and so the others were from all kinds of ethnic groups, and of those who understood French, my husband and I were the only ones that spoke it regularly at home. So we took the decision to tell the people, if it's the only way, the only place where our children can keep their French up is in that 1 hour of on Sunday when we come to church, or in a few meetings, they've lost it, because that's not enough. It's up to us to teach them French, and in the church, the respect of for the community is to be able to pray together. It goes beyond the language, and everybody must understand what's going on. So it's not necessary to insist on having French, everything in French in church. The result of that was that people respected the decision. Now they are asking us occasionally, could you do a reading in French? The hymn, the organist, can you play a hymn in French? And so we've maintained it. In giving up, we reach greater goals. Thank you. Merci. Thank you, Janine. I think that this is, as anybody else has anything to say, but I think that we have to, first I'd like to thank everybody who has contributed, especially the people who helped out today, who agreed to be part of the round table. It's very interesting, and I'm sure that this is going to continue tomorrow, even more, in the second round table. So, Calvin, thank you very much. Thank you to all the 12 people here, to all of you.
I also think it has been a, whoops, I'm talking to myself in French again. I also think that we've made a remarkable good start. We've put some very important things forward, and I think we've had some very honest and frank discussion about it, and I think people will take the opportunity to think about those things this evening and come back tomorrow. And tomorrow we start building. We build again. We started some talking today on where we're going on the road we're going to go. Tomorrow, let's really build that road. Let's pave it. Let's make it nicer than the one they got under construction on the way here. They're taking forever to build that road. And